In the 60 years Queen Elizabeth has been on the throne, Britain has seen a revolution in camp culture, and a very different kind of queen has ascended to rule Britannia's airwaves.
Will you set it now?
In that time, a special band of hilarious,
What a gay day.
groundbreaking,
That's a beautiful car.
and utterly fabulous men
Outrageously gay.
have revolutionised the world of entertainment and our whole way of life.
I can't quite believe that they did that.
Filthy.
My press agent fell off a chair.
There's moments where I'm just so explosive, I want to slap myself.
Gay men are perfect for show business.
Each crowned queen in our story has blazed his own particular trail.
You know she's been showing me how to stick the pole up.
Some totally reinvented comedy,
A lovely tin of Fanny there.
some helped change our social history, and some just made our jaws drop to the floor. Every one of them has been touched by genius.
She can't help herself.
From those hiding in the 1950s closet,
Can't it just be our little secret?
to those bravely opening the door with a cheeky wink,
Fall down in the best possible taste.
and to those more recently who have made camp a part of our daily lives.
When you see glitter, it makes you want to smile.
When he puts on the wig, he's wicked.
God save our noble queens.
Oh, shut up, you silly old faggot.
This is the story of those daring rebel performers who stormed the barricades of mainstream entertainment and changed it forever by outrageously flaunting their image, brazenly playing with their sexuality, and sticking two fingers up to the establishment. In the late 60s, youth culture was taken by the scruff of the neck and given its own subversive soundtrack. Provocative pop stars turned into gender benders with attitude, and camp rebellious sensibilities were brought into comedy which would pave the way for future generations. The seeds of change were being sown around the world. Britain was in the wild throes of flower power and free love, and slowly we were becoming more accepting.
From 1966, it had suddenly become legal to be in a gay relationship. That in itself was something new.
It was the Wolfenden Report which made homosexuality legal that the whole scene changed. Until then, it's ridiculous to think that it was a criminal offence.
Changing the law was one thing, but the real catalyst proved to be a new rebel band of pop stars. Whilst many weren't gay, they revelled in camping it up with the help of a coterie of queens hidden behind the scene.
It has famously been said that without gay managers in the 60s, we would probably never have had the British beat boom that we had. I mean, without Robert Stigwood, who was the Bee Gees manager, without Kit Lambert, who was the manager for The Who, without Simon Napier Bell, all gays.
Simon Napier Bell managed the man who epitomised this period more than any other, the godfather of camp pop, Mark Bolan.
As far as the artist was concerned, I think they knew when they had a gay manager that he was going to devote themselves to them. He was not going to have a family and children and a wife at home that he had to look after. So they became his family.
But whilst Napier Bell was gay, Bolan was married, and it was his wife June who gave him inspiration for a whole new genre in music.
He saw June wearing glitter under her eyes and just dabbed a bit on one night in a dressing room before he went on stage. And before we knew it, we got glam rock.
Bolan had the extraordinary advantage of being very beautiful. Got these elfin features, he's got this hair, he wears glitter. You don't think of it as being female, you don't think of it as being male, it's just something new, it's something that only he's doing.
Certainly, there's been a change in England in 2 years, and we are part of the change. I mean, guys now can wear makeup, they can shout and scream.
He knew he was quite beautiful with all this hair. You know, incredible hair and incredible eyes. And he took advantage of that.
Looking back on it, he was clearly being influenced by his gay friends, you know, who would dress up in a flamboyant way, who would dress up in a way that would have threatened mainstream society. And that in itself was an important act for a pop star, to appear alien.
Gay was something almost subversive. It meant that you were fighting against the establishment. It was a way of actually rebelling. And that was a part of what Mark was taking on. It wasn't simply that he was getting in touch with his feminine side. He was also saying, I'm on your side too, because I don't like the way that gay people are being treated. I don't like the way they're being attacked, you know? And let's all get together and do something about it, in a way. So it was a kind of protest.
But soon after Bolan, a man fell to earth who took camping it up to a whole new level. If you weren't a bi-curious teenager before Bowie, you certainly were afterwards.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Bowie eclipses Bolan very, very quickly and establishes himself as the defining artist of the 1970s. He's an androgynous-looking figure, David Bowie. He's never going to be a sort of macho rock star. He's this incredibly skinny, you know, kind of odd, alien-looking guy.
Ziggy played guitar.
Most of the reasons that I do what I do is because I just like startling people.
Startling?
Yeah, something to do.
You can see Bowie throughout his career looking for this what can I do? What can I do to make my mark? He seems to alight on the gay thing, on the bisexual thing, as this is the thing that's going to set me apart.
The important thing about Bowie really is that, you know, there was real substance to what he was doing. I'd never heard lyrics like, he swallowed his pride and puckered his lips and showed me the leather belt round his hips, or we're painting our faces and dressing in thoughts from the skies. You know, this was exotica.
However, Bowie wasn't just about camp makeup and outrageous costumes. Having admitted to being bisexual, he set about being as provocative as he possibly could.
Him and his guitar player, Mick Ronson, were touching in a way that you'd never seen men in public do before. There were arms around each other. They were smiling. They were looking in each other's eyes.
At one point on stage, Bowie drops to his knees in front of Mick Ronson, his guitarist, with a harmonica in his mouth, grips Mick Ronson's buttocks.
He actually gets down and performs an act of fellatio on Mick Ronson's guitar.
This becomes an image that goes out all over.
And it sounds too bald and awful to say it like that, but in fact it was just a great piece of showmanship. It was performance at its most extreme and wonderful.
There's a starman waiting in the sky.
He then goes on Top of the Pops and does Starman, and all he does on that Top of the Pops performance, when you look back at it, is drape his arm around Mick Ronson. That's all he does.
The limp wrist. You know, the next day, there's no denying that all of us, of a certain age, male mostly, were utterly changed by this, transformed. Not in a way you could put your finger on, but it just opened up an unbelievable series of possibilities about everything, not just sex, but everything.
You know, it was that thing of, like, suddenly realising you weren't the only person in the world that felt like you did. You know, that you weren't the only kind of exotic bird in the forest. There were others.
It was almost like Bowie gave people this freedom. You know, he pushed people to let them embrace being androgynous or embrace being a bit camp or a bit gay. And that's an amazing thing. That is why Bowie is still so loved today.
Subsequently, all pop performers who want to be iconic, who want to be transcendent, whether it's Madonna, Boy George, Prince, Lady Gaga, anybody, they all have to refer back to what David Bowie did.
Thanks to Mark and David, in the early 70s, no one was safe from the influence of camp pop. Even hairy old pub rockers like Mud jumped on the Pink bandwagon. Such was the prevailing mood that no one even batted an eyelid when a real queen burst onto the scene.
Freddie Mercury, I mean, was just, he was a unique performer. You know, he was somebody who was very not afraid to be who he wanted to be.
What was interesting about Queen was that you had, you know, the really straight musicians, and then in the middle of it, to put this outrageous performer.
I never twigged that Freddie Mercury was gay. Not in a million years, no. Because he was hairy, and he was in a rock band. And if you're hairy and you're in a rock band, you are heterosexual. God says so, so it must be true.
I'm almost embarrassed to admit that I think it took me 20 years to work out that Freddie Mercury was gay. I mean, literally 20 years, you know.
It didn't matter how tight his clothes were. It didn't matter how, you know, how flamboyant he was. The majority of the British public did not put two and two together and think that he was gay. They just thought he was an entertainer.
The fact that Freddie Mercury was like going on stage dressed 100% like a kind of leather queen. How more gay would you want me to be before you actually realise? I'm in a band called Queen.
Open your eyes. And so, with male pop stars strutting the stage in frocks and mascara, and the campest man Christendom fronting one of the biggest bands in the world, the pink pioneers of the music industry really had the bit between their rebellious teeth. Meanwhile, over in America, gay liberation was forming its own soundtrack, and the word for it was disco.
The fact that they were putting this kind of gay culture, you know, infiltrating it into like mainstream America and mainstream England, to me that is totally brilliantly subversive.
These days, the influence of disco can be seen everywhere, and it's all thanks to a camp revolution in the 70s which kicked down the closet door and allowed screaming queens to pour out onto the dance floor. And we lapped it up.
In downtown New York, there was a mighty storm brewing, and it was called disco. And we didn't quite understand what it was about, but we understood the power of the music. When you went to the clubs, people could have jobs that were from Wall Street, blah, 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 or they could be street sweepers. But they converged around this music and this movement and this identity, and maybe it was their sexual identity, maybe it was their coming out, if you will, or coming together, but it was the music and the dancing and the community. And when I saw that, I knew that there was something going on.
Gay people were finding a new solidarity as a result of the Stonewall riots of 1969, where they angrily fought back against prejudice and sowed the first seeds of the gay liberation movement. Gay communities began to spring up and gather together to dance in underground clubs.
I think the beauty of disco was also you had a lot of disco divas who were strong female characters. Gloria Gaynor, you know, Donna Summer, Lolita Holloway. The list is endless, really. And I think this is something that women could easily identify with, obviously, and gay men could easily identify with as well.
One of the true heroes in the story of rebel queens looked like a woman, dressed like a woman, even sang like a woman. But Sylvester James was so out, he'd surely never been in.
I think with a song like Sylvester's You Make Me Feel Mighty Real, it's just releases the hedonism inside the listener immediately. He kind of like represented the whole of that San Francisco gay disco sound. And he was living it for real.
I remember the video, and I was sitting in the living room, you know, like watching this and kind of like, you know, uncomfortable, but at the same time just thinking, oh my God, and just thinking how amazing.
More than anything, you know, Sylvester had an incredible voice. And that record, you know, that particular record, You Make Me Feel Mighty Real, you still see kids dancing to that. They have no idea who he is. It's an infectious, you know, powerful kind of dance song. But people don't really know about Sylvester. They don't know how important he was to kind of gay culture, not just gay culture, but also black gay culture. I think he's so important, and he's kind of almost dismissed, you know.
It's basically about freedom, about liberation, about gay life, and about kind of wanting to be free, wanting to express himself.
He was completely out. He was completely flamboyant. He used to dress brilliantly, big high heels, and you know he had the Weather Girls behind him. He used to call them 3 tons of fun. But most important, forget about the gay thing. You know, he was a great singer, an amazing vocalist, and you know, and he was kind of proud of what he was. You know.
Whilst there was little doubt as to Sylvester's mighty real sexuality, there was greater uncertainty when 5 hunky guys started singing about a place where gay men meet and hang out.
What about disco? I can see you bopping along to disco.
Can't stand it. Oh, it's terrible.
It's a terrible shame, Rog, because here come the village people and you can't stop the music.
Watch your backs.
The village people was so cartoon, it was so extreme, that you couldn't necessarily take it seriously. It wasn't like you either looked at them and thought, oh yeah, you know, that's a real Indian, that's a real construction worker. I mean, I don't know if anyone did. I certainly didn't.
By the time the village people got their chart hits, disco was very commercial. And I think people had forgotten that about its gay roots, and people didn't think of it as being a gay music. People thought of it as Saturday Night Fever and John Travolta. It had lost its gay connotations.
Whether it was more myth or it was really true, you know, what YMCA was this place where, you know, gay men would go and all stay and have sex and all that kind of stuff. In costumes and, you know, leather and builders. And I don't know.
It's a record about shagging men in the shower of the YMCA, right? And it's just such an undeniable piece of pop music. It becomes this global hit with this dance that goes with it.
What the village people did with disco was they reclaimed it. They put that stamp back on it saying, this is gay music. And this is not all about John Travolta in a white suit doing spins and jumps and leg flips on a lighted dance floor. This is about us fags. And the mainstream didn't know. They didn't know until In the Navy came out that this was, that they were a gay band. That's how naive people were in those days. They had in America, Macho Man, I Want to Be a Macho Man, sung by people at football games in America, heterosexual people. They had, you know, they probably had old grannies going out and buying their records.
Macho, macho, macho man, yeah. I've got to be a macho, I've got to be a
The fact that they were putting this kind of gay culture, you know, infiltrating it into like mainstream America and mainstream England, to me that is totally brilliantly subversive. And, you know, when people talk about disco, they try and dismiss the village people as a joke. But no, I think that was gay activism at its finest.
If you sat down and said to the most hardcore heterosexual, maybe even homophobic guy, well, do you know that you're out there on the baseball field dancing to YMCA, and do you hear what these dudes are talking about? They would almost disregard the lyrics because it's the groove, it's the damn groove. And I think that when you can commercialize something, you destigmatize it. And that's a good thing.
But not everyone liked disco music. In fact, in 1979, there was even a riot against it at a baseball game in Chicago, when a local DJ organised a mass burning of disco records amidst cries of homophobia. Maybe the fight for gay liberation wasn't quite won yet.
This all comes together under the banner of Disco Sucks. That's the sort of slogan, Disco Sucks. What does that say to you? Disco sucks? I mean, that seems to be, to me anyway, that seems to have something to do with the sexuality of disco. Disco is gay. I mean, you cannot deny the gayness of disco. That's where it comes from. It's specifically gay music. And it doesn't sit very well with the middle American rock fans.
And a lot of people say that was all about homophobia. And to tell the truth, I don't even think that was about homophobia. I don't think the people who were setting fire to those records were clever enough to make the link to the gay culture that it came from.
Back across the pond, there was one DJ who was setting campfire to the safe world of television comedy.
He came out of the screen at you.
three-dimensional.
It's all done in the best possible taste.
I think he offended a lot of people, but I think he loved doing that.
With the world of music being shaken and stirred by a new camp aesthetic, it was about time that the stuffy world of British theatre was given a taste of something shocking and sexually ambiguous. And in the Rocky Horror Show, that was delivered with knobs on and fishnet tights.
The Rocky Horror Show was something that really did change my life. I went to the opening night at the theatre upstairs at the Royal Court, and I'd never seen anything like it.
It was an incredible piece of theatre written by Richard O'Brien, which was over the top, outrageous, unusual, and a complete departure for its time, which took off. And this is what happens in show business sometimes. Things take off and become cult. And there's no doubt the Rocky Horror Show is a cult show.
There was gay sex, there was straight sex, there was bisexual sex, there was every type of sex you could possibly imagine and dream about. And I think still people who go and see the show fantasize that it could be them, and that's why they dress up. Every ordinary person can take out their fantasy within that show, and that's what's the great success of it.
The Rocky Horror Show soon became the hottest ticket in town, and it was no surprise when it was turned into probably the campest film ever made, with Tim Curry reprising his starring stage role.
For him, that good-looking, lovely-looking man with a pair of high heels and ripped fishnets, and as saying quite unashamedly, you know, I'm a sweet transvestite, but completely unashamedly, was liberating and empowering to some extent.
Just a sweet transvestite. From transsexual Transylvania.
Given free rein in the movie version, Tim Curry went for broke with his performance, making Frankenfurter bigger, sexier, and more provocative.
When I would see Tim up there on the stage like that and see women in the audience who were, as one would guess, straight ladies looking up there and going, hello, you know. I never thought I'd fancy, you know, a geezer dressed up like that, but I think I might. The men would be sitting with them saying, I see what you mean. Do you know what I mean? I think they were really surprised because there was something liberating about it.
He makes it bisexuality very appealing, and also that it's not commented on, it's not judged at all. In fact, if it's judged in that he looks so sexy and so fantastic, and everybody, you know, wants a piece of him. And I think that was a really interesting character, because I don't think we'd ever seen anyone like that.
He is total sex on a stick. And, you know, played by Tim Curry was extraordinary performance, and so sexual it wasn't true. From the basque that he wore, from the tiny little briefs, to the fishnet stockings with the holes in it, the heels, the whole thing. And yet, underneath all of that, female attire was a man.
So, come up to the lab and see what's on the slab. I see you shiver with anticipation.
I think that's also something that's kind of pervaded our culture, is the kind of idea of guys being a little femmy, a little bit smoky eye maybe, or the whole metrosexual thing, but yet you're still very manly. It takes a big man to be able to carry off a bit of guy liner. And so I think he was very much the start of that sort of way of thinking.
Just 7 days, oh baby, I can make you a man.
Bringing the playfully homoerotic imagery and theatrically camp choreography of the stage version onto the big screen, Tim Curry made the part of Frankenfurter his own. But Frank's sexuality was wonderfully ambiguous.
We've had Frank played by effeminate, narcissistic men from time to time, and it doesn't work. If he wants to be by Brad more than he wants to Janet, it's all wrong. What we really need is a Frank out there that will anybody, including the butcher, including the lorry driver. He's just a narcissistic hedonist, and he's selfish.
and arrogant and quite male in many respects.
He's left this big footprint that means that when characters appear in films like that, it's more likely to be treated in a positive way than a derisory way. I think that's pretty amazing.
Things were changing fast, and there was now clearly a taste for outrageous, flamboyant and shocking performers. Kenny Everett was all of these and more. He was a one-man revolution.
Excuse me, sir. Basement bill here.
None of these things had ever happened before in radio. No DJs had comic characters, there were no jingles. On Radio London, it all began.
Kenny was always ahead of his time. I think even today he would be ahead of his time in many ways. He didn't try to go out of his way not to fit in. He just was different, and you can't be something special if you're not different, but that's who he was.
But whilst Kenny was having a wild time camping it up to the max on the radio, off-air he was struggling to come to terms with his sexuality.
Kenny Everett had never actually wanted to be gay. He told his producer at Radio 1 that he didn't want to be gay, he was uncomfortable with it, and so, you know, what followed from that was that he got married.
Yes, Kenny married rock chick Lee Everett, thanks in part to the Beatles' penchant for hallucinogenic drugs.
John Lennon gave Ev a tin of Owlsley LSD, which was the strongest and purest thing at that time. And we took a few trips, and every time we took a trip, he fell in love with me. And then he said, "We've got to get married." I never stopped laughing. I laughed my way through my marriage.
Kenny's rebellious humour meant that it was only a matter of time before he transferred from radio to television. The rest is history.
The Kenny Everett Show is on the air.
He came out of the screen at you. Three-dimensional. He had no reserves, no inhibitions when he was a performer. He would just give it everything. And that was a joy to see.
Kenny Everett's comedy was camp, was based on sheer, unadulterated camp and outrageousness. I think he offended a lot of people, but I think he loved doing that.
Kenny Everett completely changed light entertainment on TV. This quick-fire sketch show, apart from Monty Python, we hadn't really seen on British television, with a very surreal element.
The first time I met Kenny Everett, he was very shy, very introverted, and I had no idea what he was going to do until the next time I saw him. He was dressed as a woman, his legs were opening and closing, he was playing a very naughty character.
Cupid stunt.
Cupid stunt. Cupid stunt.
Cupid stunt.
I have to say that very carefully.
I hope you'll all go and see my new movie, Bloodbath of the Naked Vixens. It's all done in the best possible taste.
But for Kenny, laughter possibly wasn't enough. And as a new era of sexual openness dawned in the 1980s, he began to lead a more openly gay lifestyle.
Kenny Everett was certainly thinking about how to come out, and he actually took advice from Elton John on this. And he went to see Elton John, and Elton John said to him, "If you come out, you will be more comfortable. You will be more comfortable with yourself, more comfortable with life." And I think that had a big effect on him.
Father, I have sinned.
Yes, I know. I've seen your show.
He was terribly worried and terribly nervous about how the audience and public and viewers were going to respond to him. And he said he walked past a building site where he held his breath, thinking, "I'm really going to get it now." And all the big, hairy builders, as he called, hung off the scaffolding, shouting, "Whoa, Kenny, we love you," and cheers of support and just lovely things that Kenny said he, really felt very emotional how genuinely wonderful people were to him.
It was big tabloid news, yet strangely it did his reputation no harm at all. And that was often said about Kenny Everett, that he was tabloid-proof. He was so popular, and people expected him to be a bit outrageous and to be a bit outlandish, that he never lost any fans over it.
Yes, bizarrely, it wasn't Kenny coming out. Promotion of homosexuality in schools.
Let's bomb Russia!
Let's kick Michael Foot's stick away!
I don't know how much it really damaged his career, the things he said. I think if anything damaged his career, it was the fact that he was appearing at a Conservative Party conference. I think we always like our comedians to be anti-establishment and to appear on stage with people who are actually running the country. I think that was a bad move.
But time is a great healer, and 18 years since his tragically premature death from AIDS, his anarchic, surreal and shocking comedy influences can be seen everywhere, not least on the shores of Little Britain.
Well, my dear Emily, it is to be your final night as a single lady.
That's right, Florence, my lady friend, for I'm getting married in the morning to a man.
The same love of wanting to shock and be outrageous, wear what you like, say what you like, and, make a big splash.
And nobody made a bigger splash than the gender-bending painted peacocks that were the New Romantics.
It was very ambiguous, very open-minded and very sexually sort of experimental, what was going on.
I think in America it was like I was saying, I am homosexual.
By the early 1980s, a bunch of young, glorious freaks and gender benders, heavily influenced by Bolan and Bowie, set out to move camp into a league of its own. With extravagant makeup and androgynous costumes, the New Romantics were determined not to let their sexuality get in the way.
The New Romantic movement in Britain was absolutely massive. Guys, for the first time, experimenting, wearing makeup. People's sexual partners would be like being swapped on a nightly basis. It was just like you didn't know who was going to go out with who next week. And it was very ambiguous, very open-minded and very sexually sort of experimental, what was going on. The record company said to me, whatever your sexual preferences are, you've always got to sort of try to sort of express that you are heterosexual, because you will see a nosedive in your sales.
Every movement in pop has its own icon, and the world of New Romance was no different. But Boy George was.
I can remember absolutely clearly sitting in my living room and watching Top of the Pops and Boy George and Culture Club appearing for the first time. And the whole living room was just in awed, befuddled silence.
We got this phone call the night before. Will you do Top of the Pops? We were like, yes, finally. And I remember kind of spending the whole night kind of working on what I was going to wear and, putting ribbons in my wig and getting all ready. But, that was a normal day for me. I did think about, I'm going to be on telly, so I'll take extra care about how many ribbons I wear and stuff. But, I'd always dressed up and I was always doing that to go to clubs. So it was just doing that for TV.
Do you really want to hurt me? Do you really want to make me cry?
A few TV shows that we were scheduled to appear on pulled us. Only temporarily. They were like, we can't have this, what is it, a transvestite? So the industry really reacted strongly to us. It was like, oh no, should we be promoting this? But the public kind of fell in love with us. And so that was really that's how it happened, really.
I think it was one of the most sort of transformative moments, if you like, in pop music, as much as a Bowie, because it was the next generation on from Bowie. And it was a startling thing to do, to appear that way, to dress that way, and yet be someone your mum or your auntie would get on with. I mean, it was an unbelievable trick of smuggling in what the mainstream would have considered weird energy into the mainstream without it really deeply troubling people.
It's now common knowledge that George had a long-term affair with Culture Club drummer John Moss, but he was obliged to keep it private at the time.
When I started Culture Club, I definitely wasn't hiding my sexuality. But then when I started the relationship with John, it wasn't like anyone ever said, you mustn't tell people. But knowing John, I knew that John, was private and didn't really want everyone to know his business. But I can't say that I understood that at the time. I understand it now.
Remarkably, given George's ambiguous sexuality, Culture Club became as big as the Beatles in America. Until that was, the boy let something slip at the Grammys.
We got a Grammy for Best New Band, and I said, thank you, America, you've got really good taste and you know a good drag queen when you see one. Now, I knew I was being provocative, but drag queen in England definitely doesn't have the same implications as it does in America. And I think in America, it was like I was saying, I am homosexual. It was, I heard stories afterwards that my press agent fell off a chair. People were like gasping, I'm so glad I did it. I'm not sorry I did it. I think it was a great thing to say, and maybe next time I get an award in America, if there's another time, I will say it again. After that, whenever I went in the world, I get like drag queens or transsexuals coming up to me and saying, thank you so much, you made me comfortable with who I am. So that's a really important legacy. And that was just me being flippant. I wasn't actually, okay, I have to make a really big political statement here. But sometimes by being yourself, you do the most good work.
But whilst Boy George was coyly claiming to prefer a nice cup of tea to sex, Bad Boy's Frankie Goes to Hollywood most certainly favoured the latter.
What had happened by then is that there was a great thriving gay subculture that clearly was influencing mainstream music more and more. I mean, it always had. Where you wanted to hear what was going to come, or where you wanted to see what was going to come in the next few years, it tended to be in the gay clubs you'd see it, because they got there first, traditionally. So there was an incredible amount of great vitality.
There is nothing cosy or pantomimic or anything like that about their version of gay sexuality. You look at Paul Rutherford, he's a scary leather queen. This man gets up to stuff. You know what I mean? Grannies love Boy George, they love Paul Rutherford.
Frankie's advice to relax was certainly not taken by Radio 1 and Top of the Pops, who promptly banned the song and the promo.
It did get banned because someone noticed, actually, my God, this seems to be about an orgasm. It seems to be about a male orgasm with another male. By 1984, we'd been through Bowie, we'd been through punk, we'd been through Boy George. You would have felt that we were capable and could accept that kind of thing to come forth, but it was still deemed to be dangerous and sinful and something that was effectively best kept away.
And this attitude wasn't helped by a frightening new disease looming on the horizon. HIV and AIDS was about to change the way gay culture was perceived and eventually claim the lives of some of our most loved gay entertainers.
Everyone was kind of freaking out about AIDS, and people who had gay audiences were suddenly saying that it's gays will burn in hell. It's it's God's divine retribution. This kind of stuff. Some of the media stuff that I had to put up with was disgusting. Some of the things that I had to put up with in the street were absolutely horrendously terrifying. Everything started to go really wrong as far as gay politics and liberation was concerned.
HIV was such a mysterious condition, such an unknown, such a brand new thing. I mean, if you watch stuff that was happening in San Francisco in the late 70s, when that one city, I think, lost 15,000 guys in 1 year, you realise what a huge, huge thing it was. And nobody really knew how it was transmitted. We didn't have a treatment for it. It was very scary.
With AIDS now looming in the background, Bronski Beat began to sing about the harsh realities of being gay in the 1980s.
Small Town Boy is about isolation, and it's coming from my perspective as a gay man. It's about liberating yourself, and it's about a journey of discovery. It's about taking the step to basically leave behind what actually keeps you down, and to break away from that, to discover who you are. Small Town Boy was shown on TV, it was on Top of the Pops, and there was these elements of, stuff that people hadn't really seen mainstream, you know, the whole sequence in the swimming pool, the cruising, the outrageously blatant cruising, all that kind of thing, but not done in a way that's kind of exaggerated it in a kind of camp way or a way that was just about entertainment. Again, it was about real life.
Bronski Beat might have been fiercely militant, but they needed to be. Being gay in the 1980s was far from easy, with so many obstructive laws still in place.
We were politicising our sexuality because at that point the age of consent was still 21. There was all sorts of things that could still basically have you arrested.
Lots and lots of people with every one of these acts will not have thought for a moment about the lyrics, not have cared to decode any of the stuff on display, but thought, I like that. So that may be the essence of subversion, of getting one under the radar.
Whereas gay was once seen as something that was hidden and forbidden and actually was criminalised, now it was, well, they could be your brother, or they could be your best friend. You know, and it wasn't something scary anymore. It was something that was part of everyday life. It always had been, but now it was being represented and reflected in mainstream culture.
I remember seeing Small Town Boy for the first time and being gutted that I hadn't done it first. Just like, you know, because, you know, I always wanted to kind of make that kind of song or make that kind of video, but he beat me to it. And it was so brave and so pioneering and so shocking. You know, I remember just seeing that and just being kind of admiring him, but being quite jealous.
As time's gone on, the drip effect, I think, of gay characters in sitcoms and on soap operas is, and in reality TV shows, importantly, is to really normalise that and make people realise there's nothing scary and it's always been here and it's not going anywhere and you don't need to worry about it, you know what I mean?
Next on God Save the Queens. They're out and proud, they're the reigning queens.
There wasn't a lot of it about when I started.
There's a prostitute, drug taking, liked to drink, and a shoplifter.
But of course, I mean, I suppose the main one was me.
Sing if you're glad to be gay. Sing if you're happy that way. The pictures of naked young women are best in the news of the screws and the popular press. They plaster their pages with bingo and tits, then add all the scandal and slander that